20 years he ran that team, 8 championships. And on the 5th of July, Christian Horner walks back into the Silverstone paddock with no pass, no pit wall, and no team to call his own. The cameras swarm him anyway. The FIA president pulls him aside and says, out loud, that he will be back. But nobody, not the president, not Horner himself, will say where. And the reason for that silence is the most interesting part of this whole story. Here is what is happening right now. Horner is free. On the 8th of May, the clause that locked him out of the sport for almost a year quietly expired, and the most successful team principal of his generation can walk back into Formula One whenever he likes. He is not short of money either. The settlement that ended his Red Bull era is reported at around £75 million, a war chest most owners on the grid would envy, and he is spending this summer doing something no sacked team boss has ever done. He is working the entire grid, owner by owner, quietly asking one question, not for a job, for a way in. Because the version of Christian Horner circling this grid does not want the old role back, the people who know him best say the same thing. He does not want to be a hired team principal answering to someone else ever again. He wants equity. He wants ownership. He wants to control the next team he touches. And right now, in July, there are exactly 2 ways that happens. One is a stake in a team that already exists. The other is building a brand new team from absolutely nothing. Both are live. Both are moving. And both are the reason he is standing in that paddock, refusing to say a single word about his future. And the paddock can feel it. Watch how the sport reacts to a man who technically has no job in it. He arrives at Silverstone as a guest, no team badge on his shirt, and within minutes, he is the most photographed person in the place. Rival team bosses are asked about him in every press session. Reporters trail him through the paddock. The FIA president seeks him out on camera. That is not how the sport treats a has-been. That is how it treats someone everybody suspects is about to make a very big move. And nobody wants to be caught looking the other way when he does. The silence around his plans has turned him into the most interesting figure at a race weekend he is not even working. The first of those moves is already out in the open, and it is the one sitting closest to actually happening. Back in January, Alpine put out a statement of its own, and it named him directly. Christian Horner, the team said, is part of a group of investors looking to buy in. The group he is attached to reportedly includes MSP Sports Capital, a private equity firm that has held a slice of a Formula One team before. This is serious money with a real track record in the sport, and it has put Horner's name on the paperwork. Here is the piece they are chasing. Renault owns most of Alpine, but a chunk of the team, 24% of it, sits in the hands of an investment firm called Otro Capital. Otro's backers reportedly include a cluster of celebrity names, people like Ryan Reynolds and Rory McIlroy, who bought into Formula One right at the top of the boom. Now that stake is reportedly on the market, and the figure being floated values the whole team somewhere near $3 billion. That is the kind of number that makes accountants cry. Someone is being asked to pay a fortune just for a minority piece of a team that has not won a race in years. And this is exactly where it gets stuck. Renault holds a veto over who is allowed to buy that stake. The Renault boss keeps repeating that there is no active discussion with Horner and that the group intends to keep control of its own team. Then it got messier. Mercedes was circling the very same stake as a rival buyer, which tells you how badly people want a piece of the grid. And in May, Mercedes walked away over the valuation, deciding the price was simply too high. You would think losing the biggest rival bidder would clear the path. Instead, Renault reportedly paused the entire sale. So the one confirmed route back into Formula One for Christian Horner is frozen solid right now. He has the money ready. He simply cannot force the door open, but that freeze has an expiry date, and it is the single most important thing in this whole story. Renault's veto over the stake is reported to lapse around September. After that, the firm holding the stake can sell far more freely, and the door that is bolted shut today could swing wide open the moment the summer break ends and the transfer season explodes. Everything is in place for that move. Horner is just waiting for the lock to fall off. So when the paddock talks about September, they are not counting down to a race. They are counting down to the day Christian Horner's cleanest route home suddenly reopens. And think about what that route would actually give him. Alpine is not a lost cause on paper. The team runs out of a serious factory. It has a driver lineup with real talent. And from next season, it stops building its own engine and becomes a customer of the best power unit on the grid. A smart operator walking in at the bottom of that curve with equity and a mandate to run it his way is exactly the kind of project Horner has spent his whole career chasing. He turned an energy drink brand into a dynasty once. The pitch here is that he does it again, this time as an owner rather than an employee. A 24% stake would not hand him total control on day one, but it would hand him a seat at the very top of the table and a platform to push for more. For a man who has been locked out for a year, that is not a consolation prize. That is a launch pad, and it is sitting one expiring veto away from being within his reach. There is a catch even in the best case though, and it is worth saying out loud. Renault has said, more than once, that it wants to keep control of its own team. So even after the veto lapses, Horner and his backers may still be negotiating with a majority owner who does not particularly want them steering the ship. The stake could open, the welcome might not. Which is precisely why he keeps a second play running at the same time. While that clock ticks, the other doors are being slammed one by one. Because if Alpine is jammed, you would expect the rest of the grid to be wide open for a boss this decorated. It is the exact opposite. Cadillac, the brand new team that joined the grid this season, was linked to Horner almost immediately, and its boss shut it down flat. He said there had been no talks, no plans for any, and that his backing is 100% behind the man already running the team. Aston Martin's owner reportedly told his own staff that Horner would not be joining in any capacity whatsoever, and there is real history in that one, because Adrian Newey, the greatest car designer the sport has ever seen, walked out and landed at Aston, and reportedly has no interest in working under Horner ever again. Ferrari is gone too, their boss locked in on a new deal, Lewis Hamilton in the car, no room and no appetite. 3 of the biggest names on the grid, 3 versions of the same 2 words. Not him. And on the surface, that looks like a closed door. 3 rejections, 1 frozen deal, a comeback going nowhere. Underneath, it is doing the opposite. Look closer at why each of those doors is really shut, because it tells you something. None of those teams turned Horner down because he cannot do the job. Every one of them knows exactly what he is capable of. They turned him down because he is not the kind of hire you slot into an existing structure. He is a force. He wants control. He brings his own gravity, and he reshapes whatever he touches. An owner who already has a settled team and a settled boss does not want that earthquake walking through the door, which means the very thing that makes Horner too big for a normal job is the thing pushing him toward owning one outright. Because a man who wants to own a team, not rent one, was never going to solve his problem by knocking on doors that already have an owner behind them. Every no from an existing team is not a defeat. It is Horner being pushed, door by door, toward the one option that needs nobody's permission at all. Build his own. That option has a name, and it barely made the headlines. In May, at the Cannes Film Festival of all places, Horner reportedly sat down with a senior executive from BYD, the Chinese car giant that is currently tearing through the global electric vehicle market at a frightening pace. The executive is Stella Lee, one of the most senior figures in the entire company. And the reporting from the race describes those meetings as solid. The subject of those meetings is the thing that changes everything. Not buying a slice of a team that already exists, a brand new one. A 12th team on the Formula One grid, built from an empty room with Horner at the top of it. Sit with how big that actually is. BYD's interest in the sport is not fantasy. Lee had already met Formula One's own chief executive at the Chinese Grand Prix earlier this year, so the manufacturer is circling the sport at the highest level. And for Horner, a from-scratch team is the perfect fit for the exact thing his old colleagues say he now wants. Total control. His own structure, his own engineers, his own name on the ownership papers, all of it backed by one of the largest car makers on the planet. No Renault veto. No existing owner to answer to. No Adrian Newey holding a grudge in the office next door. Everything he lost, rebuilt from the ground up, and this time it belongs to him. And look at what BYD would get out of it. Because that is what makes this more than a daydream. This is a company that has gone from barely known outside China to outselling almost everyone in the electric market in the space of a few years, and its next war is global brand recognition in places where people still do not know the name. Formula One is the single most efficient billboard in world sport, beamed into hundreds of millions of homes across exactly the markets BYD wants to crack. Pairing that ambition with the most recognizable team boss of the modern era is not a vanity project. It is a marketing strategy with a racing team attached. For BYD, Horner is the credibility. For Horner, BYD is the checkbook and the freedom. On paper, the two of them need each other almost perfectly, which is why a conversation that started over a few days at Cannes has not gone away since. And this is the quiet logic underneath the whole thing. The walls closing in around him on the existing grid are the exact force making the boldest option look sensible. Think about the psychology of it for a second. A man who was pushed out of the team he built does not want to crawl back in as somebody's employee, taking orders and sharing the credit. He wants to prove, once and for all, that the whole thing was him all along. And the cleanest way on earth to prove that is to build a winner from nothing, with his name on the door, answering to no one. A stake in Alpine scratches part of that itch. A team of his own, built from the ground up and carrying his name, scratches every last bit of it. Building a team from zero is the hardest thing to pull off in the entire sport, and Horner knows every inch of that mountain. The last brand new team to join spent years fighting political battles just to reach the grid. A fresh entry needs the governing body to reopen the process. It needs to pay off the 10 teams already there, and every one of them has a reason to block a new rival at the door. There is even a wrinkle that Horner, of all people, would weigh before anyone. Formula One is leaning toward bringing back louder, simpler engines by the end of the decade, a move away from the heavy hybrid era. And for a company whose whole identity is electric power, that shift is awkward. It could cool how far BYD is willing to push. So the bold option carries its own quiet countdown too. It is a longer road than the Alpine one, but it leads exactly where Horner wants to end up, and it fits him better than any team already on the grid. If it happens at all, it does not happen fast, and that matters for how you read every move he makes between now and then. A brand new team is a multi-year build, not a next season switch. So the smart way to see the two threads is not as competing options but as different speeds. Alpine is the move that could happen in months, the moment that Vito lapses. BYD is the move that could happen in years, the bigger swing with the bigger payoff. A man with a fortune in the bank and no clock forcing his hand can afford to chase both at once, take whichever ripens first, and keep the other in his back pocket. That is not indecision. That is a man with options refusing to waste a single one of them, which is exactly why he will not say where he is going. Look again at that moment at Silverstone, now that you know what is sitting underneath it. The FIA president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, pulls Horner aside in front of the cameras and says, plainly, that he will be back, and that where is not for him to say, even though he clearly knows. That is not a man guessing. That is the most senior figure in the governance of the sport, signaling that something is already in motion and choosing not to spell it out. Horner's own words line up with that silence perfectly. He says he will only look at doing the right thing, something with a genuine chance to win. There is no point, he says, in coming back just to have a job. A hired principal takes whatever seat opens up. A man building an empire waits for the right one and says nothing until the pieces are locked in. Then look at the two dates on his calendar. September is when the Alpine veto could finally lapse and his confirmed route reopens. And on the 22nd of October, ahead of the United States Grand Prix in Austin, Horner publishes his own memoir and narrates the audiobook himself at a race weekend when every single camera is already pointed his way. Line those two up. A man about to fade quietly out of Formula One does not choreograph a run like that. He is controlling the timing of every beat, making sure the entire paddock is listening at the precise moment he chooses to speak. And the pressure on all of it is only building, because the empire he left behind is coming apart in real time. Red Bull sits fourth in the championship this season, well adrift of Mercedes out in front, with McLaren and Ferrari both ahead of them too. The car is off the pace, and the team's own engine program is fighting reliability trouble race after race. And Max Verstappen, the driver Horner protected and promoted for a decade, sits 7th in the standings, with a performance clause buried in his contract that his own manager confirms is real. Finish outside the top 2 at the summer break, and Verstappen can walk for next season. Right now, 7th, that trigger is effectively live. The greatest driver of his era could be a free agent within weeks. Read that again. The team is 4th. The generational driver has an exit ramp opening in front of him, and the one man on earth who knows exactly how to build a championship team around Max Verstappen is out there right now, unattached, with a fortune in the bank, shopping for a team to build. The dots are sitting right there on the table, and Horner is the man who put half of them there. Picture it for a second, a new team or a reborn one, with Horner in charge and Verstappen in the car, the exact pairing that won 4 titles in a row, walking out of Red Bull together and rebuilding somewhere else. It is the possibility hanging over every one of these negotiations, and it is the reason the whole grid is watching a man with no job more closely than most of the people who have one. That is why the silence matters so much. This is not a man who has no idea what comes next. This is a man holding 2 cards face down and refusing to turn either one over. An Alpine stake that could unlock in September. A blank sheet team backed by a Chinese giant that could rewrite the grid entirely. And behind both of them, a shadow over Red Bull that grows a little darker every race weekend his old driver spends outside the top 2. Here is what makes the next few weeks genuinely dangerous for everyone else on the grid. All of these clocks are hitting 0 at almost the same time. The summer break lands, and with it the loudest transfer season the sport has. Verstappen's exit trigger sits live right through it. The Alpine veto is reported to lapse in the same window. And Horner's memoir drops just after, at a race weekend built for maximum attention. Any one of those on its own would be a story. Stacked on top of each other, inside a single stretch of the calendar, they turn Christian Horner from a man on the sidelines into the pivot the entire back half of the season could turn on. If the Alpine door opens, he moves. If Verstappen comes loose, the calculus changes for every top team at once. If BYD says yes, a 12th name appears on a grid that has spent years fighting to keep newcomers out. He does not control all of those levers. But he is standing at the center of every one of them, and he knows it. So the honest answer to where Christian Horner lands is that nobody outside a very small room knows yet. Not the FIA president who says he is coming back. Not the reporters chasing him through the Silverstone paddock. Maybe not even Horner himself, until September finally tells him which lock falls off first. But the shape of it is clear. He does not want the old job. He wants to own the next great team on this grid, and he is willing to wait and stay silent and let two separate stories ripen at once until the exact moment is right. So watch September, and that Alpine veto. Watch whether BYD turns a few solid meetings into a real entry. Watch whether Renault actually lets a buyer through the door or digs in to keep its team. And watch where Max Verstappen's eyes go the second the summer break arrives. Because his decision and Horner's may end up tangled in ways neither of them is admitting yet. Because the most successful team boss of his entire generation is not finished. Not by a long way. He is choosing, very carefully and entirely on his own timeline, exactly how he wants to come back. And the moment he finally does, whether it is a stake in Alpine or a team of his own with a Chinese giant behind it, the entire grid moves with him.